So currently I work for a company called Cengage. We are an education technology company. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And speaking a little bit more about myself, I spent about 20 years of my career, and I have navigated different industries and probably surprised a lot of my colleagues in the way that I am be able to get myself integrated into organization that I may not have any experience in or experience in the industry. So I've been working in IT or technology space, but in very different business sectors, from consumer goods, logistics, to financial sector, and also in technology company. And what I like about my experience in technology company, it's not only I joined a software company, but I became part of the team who built a software company within a larger organization. So, and my sort of niche and my area of expertise have always been working in the transformation space, help the company to get where they needed to go, completely evolve, completely change. Whether it's the business model or it's a complete makeup and DNA of organization. So those type of challenges are usually a thrill for me. And a little bit of my background, I have my undergrad degree at Northeastern University, and I have my MBA with Babson College. So let's dive in. I'd like to tell the story with 3 different examples, 3 different case studies from my personal experience. So I live in Boston. So the companies I'm going to be talking about, they're sort of have a global landscape and a global impact, but they're also, based in Boston. So for some of you who may kind of see and recognize Boston views, I'm going to be talking about the company I worked for about 9 years, John Hancock Financial Services, and the challenge that we had when we had to merge with Manulife Financial Services. So as you can possibly imagine, 2 significant, large, and 100-year-old financial institutions with everything that sort of comes with that level of challenge. My job was to bring 2 IT organizations together. Each one was about 300 people. As you can imagine, every challenge sort of on earth, including a lot of duplication of pretty much everything because of how similar we were as an organization. On the other hand, we had no synergy, no collaboration. Part of it because of the clash of cultures and also mistrust at every single level, from senior leadership teams who were, of course, threatened with each other to individual contributors who have worked for the company for 30 years on each side of the fence and could never see bringing themselves together. And of course, there's no common processes. And in terms of the technology, no integration points. And at the minimum, we had 10 different administrative systems. So sort of a full bouquet of different chaoses and dysfunctions. So this is one of the challenges that I was faced with. So now we're going to move on to a next case study. Based on these pictures, you might recognize that this is a Shark and Ninja product, small kitchen appliances. A lot of people have those products in their houses. We all love them. I was fortunate enough to work at this company, and what was extremely surprising and interesting to me, the fact that the challenge that this particular company had was the fact that we were growing bigger than we could sustain. Like, we could not sustain our own growth. And you would think this is the best problem in the world to have. And what I've learned to understand is that growing pains are actually quite real. It's as challenging, while it's exciting, but it's as challenging, if not more, if you cannot sustain your own growth. And what was different about this company is that not only I worked with a technology group, but this is sort of the span of my responsibility was to help to transform the enterprise pretty much with every team, with every functional area. Some of the examples of challenges were nothing was scalable. This was a mom and pop company for about 100 years, very localized, actually based in Canada, so very culturally different, and operating in that mode. And then with a new owner coming in, with actually grandson of the founder coming in, he was able to expand the company to the levels we've never thought was possible. With all of that, we realized that at this point, this cannot operate on a spreadsheet. This cannot operate with people just sort of knowing their little processes that they've done for 20 years in the family environment. We are becoming a billion-dollar company, and we were growing extremely fast as well. So I had to work with the finance department. I had to work with supply chain, with marketing, with engineering, product development, technology. PMO had to be revamped. So looking at the enterprise, the roadmap of enterprise transformation and running a lot of these initiatives where we did not have any tools that were appropriate for $1 billion company. All of it had to be brought in. We had a lot of people who never even thought they would have to work with sophisticated tools like that. So get them to buy in. We had, operations in China, in Canada, in the US, and we were hiring a lot. So a lot of these challenges had to be managed simultaneously because we could not stop. We could have to continue to let the company grow. So exciting, but very interesting challenge to have. And let's move on to a third company. This is where I am right now. So what I loved about this challenge was the fact that we call ourselves an education technology company, and I've been with the company for 7 years at this point. And I am proudly saying that we are a technology company now, well recognized. But when I started, we were only known as a textbook publisher. Also very proud, very established with 100-year history, but a textbook publisher organization that had to become a software company. And as I'm sure you know, that is completely different business model, completely different way to operate, completely different DNA of the company, organization, talent, everything had to be changed. So some of the specifics, important nuances were that we were not just so we are working in ever-changing industry. Education in itself has been completely revamped, and COVID, I think, proved that more than ever. Sort of digital learning is a completely different conversation to have that we had before. We had to grow and compete and to be a mature and competent commercial software company in a matter of a couple of years, while that takes decades usually. We also had to compete, and we continue to do that, with a lot of ed tech startups. And while we might have the scale and resources, we don't have some of that sort of freedom and flexibility and unconstrained innovation that the startups bring in. So we have to compete with established, well-known competitors that we've always competed with, like McGraw-Hill and Pearson, just to name a few. But we also had to compete in a completely different dimension with a lot of startups. And just sort of in general, the talent competition in technology space, this is how you win or lose. And you want to be an organization where everyone wants to come and work with you. Otherwise, you cannot really accomplish anything. So making sure that we're recognized as a talent powerhouse, making sure that people want to come work for us, changing that culture altogether was another challenge. So three very, very different case studies, different industries, different business challenges, different sort of external and market pressures. So what I would like to leave everyone with is hopefully a question and possibly the answer, that how is it possible to be able to introduce the change regardless of the complexity of the change, regardless of the industry and the type of people that you work with, can you still be successful in that change? And I would also like to add a little caveat that in my experience, whether you work on the transformation or innovation initiatives, the methodology would be similar. And I wanted to kind of share the framework that I put together for myself that I've developed for these years of all of these experiences that works for me. So I wanted to share that with you as well. I also recognize there is so much literature, there's so much research and academic learnings on the topic of digital transformation, different formats and frameworks, and they all exist, and I'm sure they work. They don't always work for me. So I wanted to share with you guys what I've come up with. And while it might seem extremely simplistic, I'm going to point out a couple of key sort of important caveats for me in the framework that I set up for myself. So let's shift to that. I'm going to go very quickly. It looks simple. I will just, like I mentioned, will give you some of the key important phases, sort of explanations for each of the phases. So any of the initiative that I work on, I think conceptually and logically it's an art to be able to drive innovation. So how do I influence the ecosystem that I'm in? So let's just jump into each of these phases. When I mean by lead, what I mean by it, and I think the most important part is that you should not be afraid to take charge. I can probably say with a lot of confidence that the very first sort of point that you're going to find yourself in is that there's going to be a lot of chaos. and there's going to be chaos at executive level, and there's going to be chaos at individual contributor level. Everyone's going to be very enthusiastic. Everyone's going to be very eager and excited or hesitant, but there's just going to be a lot of opinions. I usually refer at this stage, it's a project with feelings. Everyone has an opinion, no one has a solution. So you need to step up. You need to be not hesitant to take charge and say, guys, let's look at things, let's make sense of things. So taking charge and showing your leadership is absolutely critical here. Otherwise, that chaos is going to feel like it will never end. What I mean by a plan, again, it might feel very sort of self-explanatory, but I think the most important thing is that you need to start organizing the work. It doesn't have to be absolutely the perfect plan. It could take years of your roadmap initiatives. So you can't sort of strive for perfection for the sake of perfection, but you want to make sure that your team, your group, the people that you mobilize, they start to see confidence. They start to see method to your madness. So planning could be in any format you feel appropriate, with any level of detail you feel appropriate, but people have to see that the work is being organized, you're moving the needle, you're starting to create momentum. That's what is critical in the plan. And what I mean by communication might surprise you. What I think I pretty much can guarantee is that in the beginning of any of these sort of initiatives, there's going to be a situation where either people are going to be talking the same language and meaning different things, or they're going to use different words and mean the same thing. In any case, there's going to be confusion. So one of your most important roles is to be able to continue to clarify. What are we solving for? Use plain English. Guys, if you feel any hesitation that people still seem to be talking past each other, or you don't feel comfortable that the scope is crystal clear, stop the process. Stop everything, bring the right people together, simplify, focus on what exactly needs to be done. And until you feel that level of confidence, sort of do not move forward. Do not put any, even if you get a lot of pressure from executive team, from the board, and everyone sort of needs to move forward, have that sense of conviction to say, we're not in a healthy place. We have to be very clear on what we're working on before we move forward. So what I would quickly move next to the phase, sort of moving on to the next phase. And within this phase, I think what's sort of changing is now communication, you use it differently. It's all about being able to celebrate successes and keeping positive momentum. So of course you're going to need status reports, and of course you will do a lot of cadence and a lot of sort of just typical communication. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to controlling the narrative, focusing on successes, keeping that positive conversation in the organization going. So this becomes sort of the new, almost like a white noise. We always talk about the initiative. It's always happening. Here's all the things. So you keep everyone informed and everyone aware of what's going on. So those are, I think, the important nuance of the communication shift in the way you would be communicating. And then execution, again, might feel a little bit more straightforward. You decide what's appropriate. What's the level of rigor is acceptable in your organization, how sophisticated you are, what is considered to be table stakes. I think for you as a leader is to set the tone that you get to a point that you feel like, well, this is a well-oiled machine. This phase feels so different from that phase one when you were in the sort of constant chaos by design. Now you've shaped this into the program that it needs to be, and it almost runs itself. Of course, there's going to be complexity and, again, multi-year initiatives and hundreds and if not thousands of people involved, but you have to get to a method that you feel is sustainable. It's now not chaotic, it's sort of under control. And maybe the least, maybe the most surprising and a little bit counterintuitive is that what I mean by lead in this phase, it is actually your time to become a servant leader. This is where you have to get your team to be known for the successes that they're driving. Your name literally has to fade away. My goal at the end of these initiatives usually is so my name gets forgotten. No one remembers that it was Alina's show or it was Alina's project. It really becomes sort of, people don't remember sort of their prior history. They always felt they were part of this initiative. It was theirs to begin with. That is the shift that you have to get them to, and that's how you influence them. So this is sort of these steps that I usually follow, but there's also another, so just going to summarize, I just want to kind of put it all in front of you guys again as a slide. And one of the important points that I'd like to make is that, oh, sorry, just Here, like I said, leading in the beginning and leading at the end are almost opposite ways of behavior of you as a leader. But you do it consciously, you do it masterfully, you do it in a way that people understand that you work in the environment as appropriate. So then, same thing with communication. You want to make sure that it's a crystal clear what you guys are trying to accomplish. There's no room for any confusion or misinterpretation. And then communication is all about celebrating successes, making that sort of constant voice of here's all the positive things that are happening. So this is what I do. This is what works for me. This is what I've done, as I mentioned before, in different organizations, different sizes, different people, different business sectors. But this sort of intuitive way of the art part of transformation has helped me in the past. There's also one trick that I would like to share with you. And this is, again, a lesson learned. I learned the hard way. And even if you follow this process perfectly well, you could still possibly fail. And in order not to fail, you need to be extremely aware of power of early adopters. So I think a lot of us understand the sort of diffusion of innovation kind of chart, and people understand, it's applicable in the launch of a new product. It's applicable in any innovation. It's applicable in adoption of technology. And I knew all along, I knew about this from my business school, and what I failed to recognize is that actually that's not something theoretical. I do need to understand who my early adopters are, because they're the ones who drive the change. So it's not about having a change plan. It's not about bringing consultants and experts to help you, do trainings and do soaking sessions. You will do all of that and all of those, the right techniques and tactics to do. If you do not know exactly who your early adopters are, if you don't embrace them, if they're not the ones who is starting to sort of take on that change and start to live it, none of that work that we just talked about would matter. None of it would work. So I learned, of course, the hard way, and I think this is a mistake I will never, ever make again. And I wanted to share that with you as well, is that there is a method to be successful in your transformation, but there's also a method to nail it. There's a method for it to stick, and it has to do with other people, with adopters, not with you as a person, as a leader, as an executive who drives that change, but the ones who's gonna embrace it and live it, and they're the ones who are gonna convince everyone else. It will never be you. So a couple of just a very quick takeaways that I'd like to share with you. People, I think, of course, we all know that, but it cannot be said probably, it is the most important thing, making sure that you rely on the culture and you invest in your people. Planning is paramount. However, and I do come from program management background, so I'm all about planning and execution, but it has to be appropriate and has to be enough. It can never be, just a lot of perfect planning for the sake of planning. Be flexible. Things will change. That is literally normal. So the plan you had in mind, it's just in that point in time. That plan will evolve, and the change in itself is absolutely normal. So you have to get used to the fact that you're gonna live in the constant state of change. Change is the normal. So be comfortable to be in uncomfortable. Sort of that's one of my biggest learnings for myself. Lead when leader is needed. As I mentioned, there are gonna be times where you have to step up. It has to be undeniable who's in charge and who's taking that responsibility. But also making sure that when you need to be forgotten, when it's completely sort of the team's show, they have to feel the sense of ownership of it. So moving on very quickly, be that independent point of view to the problem. Don't be afraid to speak up. You might be the one who have to stop the project. I've done that before. So have the guts to do that. Have the guts to tell people what they may not want to see or maybe not able to face. You have to do the right thing for the organization at any point in time. Embrace resistance. You can influence and make the change. You just have to do it through your early adopters. So with that, I would like to end with one of my favorite quotes. All great changes are preceded by chaos. Thank you very much for this opportunity to tell my story.